Thank you to everyone for joining this session. I think we'll get started. So this is the session on IATI data use and analysis. So we will cover a series of lightning presentations in this session on how data users have explored, analyzed, and used IATI data. I'm Sarah McDuff. I'm an analyst with UNDP, also sitting on the IATI Secretariat. And as many of you know, the journey to data use is a process. And so in this session, we're interested in hearing about all the steps in that process, from how users have navigated finding the data they need to methods for analysis, along with examples of how IATI data has been used. And I would like to extend a special thanks to all of the presenters who agreed to share today. We're very appreciative that you're sharing your experience with the community, and also like to thank everybody who's joining this session today to learn more about how IATI data is being analyzed and used. A few housekeeping items before we get started. I just want to, if we can move to the next slide. I just want to make sure if everybody could make sure that their Zoom display name includes your full name and organization. And if you could also please ask any questions via the chat box. And there is interpretation available in French and Spanish. So if you navigate to the bottom of the Zoom screen, you're able to select the appropriate channel if you'd like to have interpretation for this session. So we will move from one presentation to the next. So please put any questions in the chat, and then we will hopefully have time at the end for some Q&A. But I will hand over now to my colleague, Amy, who will do a bit of introduction of the presenters.
Cheers, thank you, Sarah. Great to see so many of you in this kind of Zoom room. We've got 7 fantastic speakers for you today. We've got 6 confirmed, 7th may or may not turn up. We'll find out if there is good enough connection for that to happen. As a quick run through, we're going to be starting off with Athira, who works at Fields Data, and some of the work they've been doing about using IATI data internally. We'll then move on to Rebecca, who is with the Department of International Health at Georgetown University. He's been exploring some of the mental health and COVID-19 responses in the recent pandemic. We're then moving on to Alex, who's at Development Initiatives, looking at how we can begin to map subnational expenditure and visualize that. We've got Mohita, who about looking at understanding donor markets with GAI, and on to Huang, and some of the research that she's looking into with South Asia, looking at a mixture of different IATI data and different data sets. Followed by Marion, who works with World Vision, using IATI for partnering and acquisitions. And then potentially a presentation by Brent, who runs a humanitarian AI meetup group, about using IATI for voice applications, but we'll see if we've got time. If not, we'll try and get a recording from him to put on IATI Connect later. Without further ado, can I please start with Athira? I will stop sharing my screen and over to you.
Yeah, sure. I'm hoping my screen is visible.
We can see your screen.
Hello, everyone. Your Fields Data. Before I let you know what we do, let's try and understand why we do what we do. Back in 2017, Peru had faced torrential rains, because of which the coastal population had to move inwards towards the deserts. The IDP camps were set up within a few months, and different organizations were coordinating different camps. But because of the lack of coordination, there were few problems faced, like the families there, instead of receiving 1 bucket, received 4 buckets from 4 different organizations. Eventually, the extra buckets had to be sold off in the public market. So there arises a question. Why do the people struggling in the camps have to worry about selling of these extra buckets? But what I just mentioned is a toned down version of the problems faced by the people in the camp. No doubt that the humanitarian organizations today are carrying out life-saving efforts on the ground, but why do these same organizations end up duplicating work? Well, leaving all the bureaucracy and politics aside, it's due to the lack of data that organizations find it difficult to coordinate, even if they really want to. So using the framework proposed by UN OCHA, we are trying to use a mechanism to track the 4 W's, that is who, does what, where, and when. I'll explain a practical example. So say suppose a disaster strikes. It takes almost 4 weeks, that is a month's time to create the 4 W's. And even after that, the accuracy of the data is quite questionable considering the given time constraints. So what we propose is having a system having 4 W's already in hand before a disaster strikes. So when a disaster occurs, the local organizations can directly use the 4W map and collaborate with other organizations for effective work. And all this can be done within a span of a week. Well, the key differentiating factor in our approach is the bottom methodology that we use. That is, we use a network of field experts who understand the context best and combine it with the publicly available data sources by scraping data and using machine learning. And we try automate the plan of receiving the information directly from the organizations. But since today our presentation is focused on IATI data, for the 4 W's, we start off by downloading the IATI data sets from the IATI cloud, then filtering and cleaning the data by retaining only the columns that we want, followed by standardization of data, and then combining it with other data sources like OCHA and the data collected by the Fields data team. And finally, analyzing and visualizing the 4 W's on Google Data Studio dashboard. We then make these clean available data sets publicly available to the on platforms like HTX and Statista, and to smaller organizations in the form of PDF formats via WhatsApp. So this is how a final outcome looks like. This dashboard not only helps us in answering various questions, but the addition of IATI data also helped us in finding out the overlapping records. And by overlapping records, I mean the intersection of all the 3 sources, that is Fields data, OCHA, and IATI. So to perform the above mentioned tasks, there's a lot of manual work involved, and considering our small team at Fields data, it's really difficult for us to do all the tasks humanly. So we decided to shift on to machine learning. So we at Fields data are using IATI data to train a model so that we can automate the process of classifying the 4 W's from any unstructured data that we receive, like the PDFs or documents, whichever documents that we receive. In the process, we did face few challenges, like with respect to location. While collecting data, we collect state or provincial level information, while IATI lacks local information, which makes it difficult for us to map the organizations. And when we collect data from smaller organizations, we have observed that whenever we ask for more information, the lesser accurate responses have been received. Also, IATI focuses on activity-specific data, while the smaller organizations do not usually focus on activities or projects, which makes their data unfit to be uploaded for IATI. And talking about the technical support, smaller organizations find it difficult because they do not have a dedicated technical team for the same. Also, we heard that recently IATI has been working on developing a free publishing tool, which is quite exciting. So to wrap up, I would like to say that localization is the need of the hour, and it is an important factor that needs to be focused today. And localization of it won't be possible unless we identify the local organizations first. Thank you.
Cheers, thank you, Athira. Super interesting to hear about your application of machine learning to IATI data classification. Yeah, it'd be great to hear more about that in the future. Next up, can I welcome Rebecca?
Okay, can we see that?
We can see you, we can see your presentation.
Great. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And thank you to Amy and Sarah for the quick introduction and inviting very different applications of using the IATI data. I'm really excited to hear all of the other speakers afterwards as well. So I'm going to share a very different version of using this kind of data that from what Athira just explained, and how we used IATI data to explore mental health response within the international COVID-19 funding response over the past 18 months. A very, very brief background just to kind of situate why we did what we did. So prior to COVID-19, mental health was already one of the leading causes of morbidity worldwide across all global populations. And now that we are well and truly into the pandemic, research is emerging from general populations around the globe that is associating COVID-19, whether it be lockdowns, whether it be economic losses, social isolation, and having the disease as well, with additional adverse mental health outcomes. So this comes on a background that our previous research showed that in the past decade, just 0.3% of development assistance for health globally over an entire decade went towards mental health. This is a tiny, tiny amount of funding on the background of having a large disease burden, and also on the background of gaining increasing attention from the donor community and from the international development community about really needing to increase funding and action for mental health. So combining all of this background and then the COVID pandemic, it really naturally raised the question for us as to can a neglected issue become an opportunity? So will this increased need for and also attention towards mental health translate into funding and hopefully into action? And that's where the IATI data came in. So we sought to use IATI data for two main reasons. The first one was availability, that very quickly we could start to see what was happening in 2020 and 2021 rather than needing to wait a couple of years after the fact with some other traditional data sets. And then very, very importantly for us too, and this was the reason we first approached IATI to use their data, was the ability to have project level information and to really see what a project involved, and then to be able to make our own classification at more detail than a sector classification, or in our case, even just a disease classification within health. So to be able to access and analyze the data, we were very kindly provided with a mass download from Amy of all COVID-19 tagged projects that were happening. We then put together a research team and we went through and we read all of that project level information so that we could actually determine within humanitarian response how much consideration was going towards mental health and COVID-19. So for example, if a project involved psychosocial counseling for someone that had been diagnosed with COVID-19, that then contains an element of mental health. Also, there might be projects that respond to COVID-19 and just provided educational resources, for example. So that did not involve mental health. So we were able to make that classification at the very detailed level. And then we tallied up all of the projects that we were in, categorized as mental health relevant, and we were then able to send those IATI identifiers back and get the transaction data for all of those projects, and then actually be able to put a dollar amount that is being contributed in considering mental health within the international COVID-19 response. So we were able to use this data very successfully. And we are using it just on its own as really kind of a checkpoint, and just to highlight as this is unfolding how the international donor community is considering mental health within COVID. There were some challenges involved. For us, it was really just that the project level information that we used for our classification and the transaction information were not in the same data set. So we did need to reconcile some data sets. There was also a potential for double counting transactions. For example, if a donor government reported a transaction to an international organization, and then that international organization reported their transaction to, say, a local implementing NGO in country. So we went through the data. We weren't able to find anything that was double counted, but there was that potential there too. And also we found that some things were tagged as being COVID-19 funding, but the transaction date, for example, maybe back in 2017, 2016. So it was really needing to go through and refine the data, which I actually think on the flip side is an opportunity of being able to use this data at such a detailed level, is that you really can go through, make your own categorizations, really refine it. It has that ability to really interact with the data and draw out what you're interested in and be able to sort and filter as needed. I think the opportunities in using this data definitely outweigh the challenges. I think in the amount of information that is available there, but then also the one-on-one support that we were able to get from IATI and how to use the data, making sure that we understood that we were using it appropriately, the terminology, the ability to reconcile transactions with projects that we were interested in. And I hear that this is starting to feed into a new tool too, which I think is going to be really exciting to see what comes out and to help satisfy the appetite that I think is growing and rightly so for being able to have transparent and timely data too. So our outcome was that this data has allowed us to highlight the ongoing neglect of mental health from the international donor community, that in a dollar amount, really not a lot is being contributed to projects that involve mental health within the COVID response, which is unfortunate to see that this is ongoing from the period before COVID-19, but we really hope that being able to use this kind of data in a timely way, that this can serve as a baseline to really kind of highlight and to grow from, and to make sure that we increase awareness and really encourage the donor community to translate all of this focus and drive for mental health into increased funding and increased action.
Cheers, thank you, Rebecca. And it's been great working with Rebecca over the last few months and seeing you guys slowly learn how to use the IATI data and pull out those opportunities, as there have been the challenges, but it's great to see, outcome of the work and the hard work that you guys have put in. Next up, we have Alex Miller.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear and see me?
We can hear and see you.
Hi, I'm Alex Miller. I'm a data scientist with Development Initiatives. And today I'm just going to show a brief data science perspective on mapping subnational expenditure through IATI. And hopefully this kind of methodology is applicable to the talks that have gone already, and hopefully can be utilized by several other people on the call as well. So very basically, which elements are the most useful to look at for subnational data? It's mainly through the location element, which is a child of the IATI activity. And I guess the main challenge a lot of people face in pulling out this kind of data is that the children of the location element are available in relatively incompatible forms. So you can have free text location names in the name narrative child element of location. You can have administrative codes in the administrative element, and that has both a code attribute and a vocabulary attribute. And then maybe most simply, but sometimes the most inaccessible to a lot of people, is actual point coordinates, longitude and latitude, available in the point position element. So practically, how do you go about extracting, transforming, and loading this data into your data sets? I mean, don't worry about copying any of this down. At the end, I've provided all of this code and data in a GitHub repository that you're free to clone and use yourself. You can get the location data from any type of data store that you like, the IATI Cloud, Data Store Classic, whichever source you're getting it from. Just make sure that you can separate out the location elements if they are comma separated. I'm partial to using the raw XML, and if you want to do so, I highly recommend the LXML package in Python, and particularly the function iterparse from Python, because it is very easy on your computer's memory. It incrementally steps through elements. You can give it a tag, in this case, the IATI activity, and it will only load into your computer's memory one activity at a time for processing. And it can step through the entire IATI registry in less than 5 minutes. So very great for really rapid exploratory data analysis and pulling in individual elements you want to analyze. And then in particular for the administrative element on the right-hand side here, I have a snippet of R code that I use. And if you take a look at particular the administrative vocabulary code G1, stands for geonames, which I've found to be probably the second most rich source of subnational location data, second to the actual point coordinates. And that can be very obtuse for a lot of people because it's a 6-digit code or something like that, and it's just tagged as G1. And what do you do with that? You can actually go to geonames. They have an API. It's free to register an account without paying any money. You get something like 10,000 individual calls to their API, and you pass their API the code, and it can pass back to you the name of the subnational location, as well as the longitude and latitude. And so once you put those all together, in this particular example, we were looking at a couple thousand activities from Chad from 2016 to 2021. And you can see on the left, these are the point elements from the point child attribute put onto the map. So we had about 1,900 of those. And from the geonames API, we had a further 183. And you can see for the most part, those are in the centroids of the individual administrative one districts. And earlier I did mention the free text names. And if you want to go into a really deep analysis, you could actually use the geonames API to do what's called reverse geocoding as well, where you give it the name of a location and it will search through its database, find the closest match name, and return to you the point coordinates. But unfortunately, of the 358 named locations in this data set, only about 5 actually represented subnational locations. The other 353 were just the word Chad repeated over and over. So I decided not to include those for this analysis. And then once you have all of your subnational location data phrased in longitude and latitude, you can do what's called a point and polygon operation. So these are the Chad administrative one districts taken from the Humanitarian Data Exchange. And literally all you do in R is you take the districts, you overlay the points, and you assign a district to each and every point. And from there, if you have financial data in your data set, you can aggregate that up. And this really should just be sort of the starting point of an exploratory data analysis. So you can see in this example, the district Borku just happened to have the most amount of expenditure going to it. And so you might start to ask questions, why does Borku get that much funding? Is it some publishers decided to use the centroid of the country, for example, as a subnational point, at which point that gets assigned to Borku just coincidentally. And hopefully that's a good springboard for adding subnational data to other analyses. So if you want to take a look at all of the Python code, R code, and data that went into this, it's all available at github.com/akmiller01/AYATI-VCE-chad-geo. Thank you.
Cheers, thanks Alex. Are you able to put the link to GitHub into the chat for everyone to access?
Yes, I will do. Yep.
Great, thank you very much. Up next we have Mohita from DAA. Welcome, Mohita.
Thank you. Good morning and good evening, everybody. I'm Mohita and I'm representing DAI, who is both a publisher as well as a consumer of the IATI data. It is great to be part of this presentation and understanding everybody's different way of using IATI data today. Today, I'm going to talk to you about our work in consuming the data from the market analysis point of view. With that, let me start with a quick introduction on DAI. DAI is a global development company who has historically, over the past 50 years, is into 90% of their work has been into donor government. Their mission is to make a lasting difference in the world by helping people improve their lives. These are the few technical services that we expertise in: digital acceleration, sustainable business, economic growth, and governance. And furthermore, DAI currently is operating in 80 plus countries, has over 5,000 employees across the world. Before we get into how we went about working on the IATI data, this is a sneak peek of our dashboards. We could not share the live ones, but this is a view where it shows the sector data, how we are representing implementers data. We've used both activity as well as transaction level data to create this dashboards. So let's dive into our purpose of using the IATI data. We wanted to understand the overall funding flow of various government, where we wanted to get answers such as what is the trend in the ODA flows, how is the sector or the regional priority shifting, and also understand which implementer is implementing where. Further, we wanted to understand the focus and duration of the projects implemented in each of the recipient countries and its distribution by sector. This was important for us from the point of view we support the strategic team, where they like to understand the trends over year on year and commitments and disbursements spread across. How did we build the dashboard? We chose IATI platform. Why? Because it had multiple publishers. We extracted the data, explored and learned about the data parameters and definitions based on all the links that is available on IATI. After understanding the data, we envisioned what kind of information we could give to our end users that were our strategy team or the project teams. What is the storyline that can be said by this data? And also evaluated different interfaces on building a self-service model. So our current dashboard is self-service model where a user can go ahead and build their own data and also analyze. Further, finally, we built a dashboard where we needed some technical support because IATI data wasn't as easy to extract and connect to our tools. So we needed some technical support for transforming the data. We supplemented few of the external data, for example, financial transparency system of different governments, wherever the information was just missing from the IATI's end. And then we've currently built an auto refresh model. It's a live dashboard. Moving on to our learning and adaptability. When we started this whole project about 2.5 years back, we started with 3 major assumptions. The first assumption was uniformity in the data across the publishers, because we look at different donor governments. So for us, it was not just one data set, one publisher data, it was different publisher data. But unfortunately, we did see after working on a couple of publishers' data that different publishers were using these fields and schema differently. For example, I don't know why I'm getting this, but yeah. For example, when we were using FCDO data, FCDO data has program level as well as sub-activity level information that can be identified by hierarchy. Whereas when we looked at the EU or the Germany data, it was completely different, as their reporting style is different because of their own internal financial flows. The next assumption was stable access points and format of the IATI. We've seen over the last 2.5 years that IATI is evolving, and simultaneously we also had to make the changes to our model, moving from classic to cloud, and probably the third time, that is the data store in next 3 to 4 months. Thus, we saw changes in the platform as well as in the format. The third and the final assumption was about, we did a lot of learning by ourselves instead of connecting to the IATI community and the staff. So we assumed that we should master it first and then connect to the team. But last 6 months has been great, where we have connected to the IATI team, which makes us think that we could have connected earlier in the time and smoothen made our learning curve faster. This is my final slide, and which I would like to close by some benefits and challenges that we've had with IATI data. Benefits, of course, easy access points, standard data format, and timely updates. Why I say standard data format specifically is because even if we moved from one publisher to the other, we didn't have to do like 100% relearning of the publisher data. We could reach to the 70% learning, which we historically had, and 30% was probably new. IATI standards and validation process, very important from our standpoint of view, because it increases the reliability of the data. We don't have to do additional validations on the data end. We just have to understand how the data is presented. And finally, for us, we found most of the fundamental data of the projects on this platform, which was great. 2 major challenges that we found with this data was we wanted to connect the data to our Power BI tool. So it was not a quick plug and play mechanism where we could extract the data and connect to the Power BI. We had to transform the data. It took us time, and we had to rebuild that model. And finally, the frequent changes, because it has in the last 2 years, in the short time period, we have seen changes on the IATI end, where we have to rework, and our progress also has been slow because of that. That's about it. Thank you.
Cheers, many thanks. Yeah, and really great reflections on both the challenges of using IATI data and some of the opportunities. And like Mohita said, please do, if you're wanting to get to know IATI data, please do connect in with IATI Connect and with the technical team. We are here to help and can hopefully speed up learning processes for others. Wonderful. Up next we have Hao. Are you ready?
Oh yes, let me share my screen here. Yes. So hi everyone. Today I'm sharing my experience to just compare through different databases, IATI, IATI, CRS, IHME, and AData. And so this is my structure, and from my research question to my questions. And the first is about the background. And South Asia is the second largest development systems for health recipients, just second to the Sub-Saharan Africa. And I focused on development system for health in South Asia. Basically, want to answer who donate how much money through which channel to whom for what. And just it is a mapping process really. And firstly, I explored IT because of its good visualization. Deep Portal is really attracting me a lot, and the data is really easy to use and easy to understand. Newly updated, and detailed project information. And during my process to understand the data, I shift to CRS because basically at that time I was really doing an overarching mapping instead of specific scrutinization. And CRS is good at its accuracy and constant price, and because it is good for sequential comparability. And they provide annual spending is really fairly enough for me. And they also did deduplicated data and ready-to-use information on channels. And so first I tried to just download data from country development finance data. And this is the Excel, the picture of Excel form. And so you can see that there are some, and the second one is the data I download from the CRS. And here I have added some new variables to categorize the donors. And it's some late work that I did. And however, both databases lack data from China. So I went to IATI. IATI provided data from aid from China, but mostly from open sources, and especially like a press release. But they only categorize into purpose category level, like health or population, reproductive health, things like that. And then because of I need specific information on health, then I explored the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. They provide specific data on development assistance for health. And they're good at constant price, longer time period, and they have also deduplicated data based on CRS data. So, but the problem is that they are not project-based, and they don't have description for each project. And I'll explain you what it means. First, it's about the data. This picture shows you that their data from the academic journal article and donor recipient official sources. They also provided a URL and the website for each development system for health. And yes, and this one is from the IHME, and you can see that it's very different because it's really kind of flow-based data, because they have the year, they have the source, channel, and recipient, and then they just give you a number of the assistants, but they do not provide project-based data. And so it's really a process data, but instead of a raw data. And yes, you can see that they also provide this kind of flow-based program, yeah, things like that. So it's very different. And so this is the initial comparison between these four databases. For IT, for me, is more focused to NGOs, and CRS, mainly OECD countries. And according to IHME, they claimed that CRS only includes information from international organizations when they are served as the direct financial channels from the OECD countries. So it's really underreported. And the IATI data, they provide data mostly through government channels and few from the international organizations. In terms of the calculation, we can see that from the CRS, the core contributions, they are deleted from the bilateral aid, but the IHME, they have moved forward. They even calculated the core contribution proportionally attributed to country donors. So they've really traced back all the way back for all the development assistance to the ultimate donor country instead of international organizations. And it's kind of an idea for us to learn how to understand this data. And so this is my preliminary results, and we can compare through the amount of development assistance for health in South Asia between 2002 and 2017. And we can see that even though they have different kind of value for currencies, but the HME reported much more amount of assistance compared with CRS or IT. And I think maybe it's because they have included more organizations, I'm not sure. And there are another differences about the purposes, because IT, CRS, and AData, they have followed the similar digit code for the assistance purposes, but the HME is very different. They are disease and activity. And this is an example. You can see that the description of the variable names, that they have also include the orphans and vulnerable children in the assistance for HIV and AIDS. So it's more like health specific categorization. And this is a preliminary difference between these four databases, but ADA is for China, so it is very different. And so from my understanding, I think that IT is more like raw data, and we can process it according to our need. And the second-hand data is from the ADA, and preliminary process data is CRS, and further process is IHME. And so IHME is really used, I feel like used most for development system for health. So I can find a lot of articles for that, but I think currently there is a lack of usage of IT for in the field of health, and I think it's a really opportunity for that. And there are some questions from my perspective view. First is the key data missing, especially from China and India. So there are some ways to calculate, estimate the assistance from China, but mostly we don't have much project-based official data. And from India is a big recipient and big donor inside South Asia. And for me, it's still a little bit hard to understand the data, because there are a lot of kind of disparities and what are the differences means for analysis and how to process data. And the final one is the future for assistance, because here are a lot of rising costs for financing global public goods and common goods for health, instead of specific just assistance to specific countries. So maybe this kind of future may be enriched or broadens or undermines the meaning of the development assistance for health. I'm not sure, but it's an open question. And yes, that's it.
Cheers. Thanks, Hao. We are at time. Super interesting to see a comparison of the different data sets and the challenges and opportunities for each, and maybe even like the opportunities of using them alongside each other to infer that missing data that we know is such a gap in IATI, particularly with South-South cooperation. Moving on to the next speaker, we have Marion from World Vision.
Just go. Right, I hope everyone can see this okay. It's filling the screen. Okay, so I'm Marion and I work at World Vision UK. So we're part of the wider World Vision International Partnership. So it's quite key to know that we're a support office, so we support field offices which we have based on the ground in various different countries. So we have, for World Vision UK, we have our priority countries that we focus on. So we're, sort of main, our main focus is on those, on how we can work in those countries, and not necessarily just anywhere, but just key places. And I'm the IATI point person for World Vision UK, but I should say that it's not my main job. It's probably still a fairly recent thing for World Vision to be using this data. We've had a World Vision point person, IATI point person, for a little while, but it's always been sort of part of a role where people are doing other things as well. So I'm sort of trying to promote the use of IATI data and show how we can extract useful information. So as part of that journey, I've been thinking, okay, how can I present this in a way that's going to excite everyone and see how it's useful? And I think I'm realizing I've got a lot of things to learn from all the different data sources that other people are using that could be a lot more relevant for me. So at the moment, the sort of most obvious thing is how to use the data for partnering and acquisitions. We're a fairly small team, the Policy and Programmes Department, and at the moment we sort of apply for lots of sort of relevant grants that come along. We sort of grab them and spend lots of time applying, but it might not always be the best use of our resources. So I've been thinking it could be quite useful to know sort of where other organisations work, where the donors are now, focusing their investments, where's the best places for us to think, okay, we've got a really good chance of getting this grant and this is the place to go for. These are the grants to go for, and maybe other grants we could leave behind if there's too much competition in that country. So if I just go quickly on. So I've been extracting the sort of visual side using dportal and just kind of wider, more generic information at the moment, though I think probably in time we can start to sort of drill down a bit deeper and make use of that. So even just things like, who are the main donors in Uganda, which is one of our main countries where we work. So just extracting that from dportal. I don't know whether I should show dportal, whether people know how to use it, whether that's an obvious thing, I'm not sure. If you think, maybe I don't know if you know much about what people's knowledge might be, whether I should go into dportal and show that.
Yeah, I'm happy to see. At the moment, we can just see the first screen of your slide.
Okay.
So
can't see this. You can't see the seconds. You can't see the second slide.
No.
Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. Let me stop sharing and go in a different way. I've been on my first slide for a while, so it's only what I've changed recently. Can you see this now?
Yes, that's good.
Graph. Okay, so it might make more sense to what I'm talking about. So as I was saying, we're looking at all the the donors going into Uganda. So so you see sort of further down, this is the top 10 donors by amount of money that's being sort of poured into Uganda from different development organisations, different donors. So it can be quite useful for us to look down and see ones you maybe didn't expect, like sort of Sweden's got quite a lot of money going into Uganda, which perhaps we wouldn't know about before. African Development Bank, there's all sorts of different ones that we might not think are the most obvious. And I extracted it as well in a different way. I hope you can see this next slide. Can you see the next slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay, well, that's good. So for this one, I just extracted data from 2 different years. So on dportal, going in and selecting 3 different years, but 2021 there still wasn't as much data in when I ran this report, but just interesting to see for us sort of how donor funding is changing. So for the World Bank, they seem to be investing quite a lot more in Uganda than in 2020 than they were in 2019, which obviously could be to do with COVID, the pandemic. So it would need sort of going into that a little bit more to find out maybe why. But for us, that's quite useful just to know that, there's maybe lots of grants coming from World Bank. Let's look out for that. Let's align ourselves. What are they interested in? What kinds of projects are they looking at? And maybe we can start to, build up our technical expertise in sort of education a bit more than we are at the moment. So this is another example. So looking at education, we haven't done some projects in education, but maybe not as many. Bangladesh is one of our key countries. So I just ran a report looking, what's the donor spend on education in Bangladesh at the moment? Where's that expenditure coming from? Are they the kind of donors we normally use? We're normally, we can apply to those places. Is that relevant to us? And just quickly going to the next one, just looking at the different sectors. So I just did a report looking at funding in Bangladesh by sector. So then you can just really see, and a comparison you can maybe do over a few more years, just to see where expenditure is going down, where it's becoming more popular. I know with FCDO, they're starting to prioritise education a lot more than they were before, and other areas are sort of going down. So that just encourages us and guides us as to what we can do our end to prepare ourselves for that, look out for those kind of grants, maybe have less technical expenditure going on, WASH, for example, like health activities, because perhaps that's not where the grants are at the moment. So it's all those sort of things that have been quite useful, being able to look up. But obviously I'd be quite interested to see, going into a lot more details others have done, and using different ways of analysing the IATI data to be able to make better use of it. And obviously as more and more donors and partners use IATI, which is happening more and more, that becomes more and more useful to us. I think that's all I'll share for now. Thank you.
Cheers, thanks Marion. Yeah, and great to see how World Vision been using IATI data for that information learning and kind of strategic planning internally. I know there have been quite a few different links that have been put into the chat of different IATI data use tools. So please do have a look for those, and for those of you who are watching that might be of interest. I will hand over to Sarah to close.
Thank you, Amy. I don't know if you can share the screen just with that last slide. Would that be possible? Thank you, Amy. So I just want to thank everyone again for presenting and sharing your sort of journeys to use IATI data. I think it's so important to focus on the process, what it takes to be able to access and analyze the information to be able to arrive at the use. And so I think that sharing that amongst the community of data users that IATI has is super important, so that we can all learn from each other. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of areas in which you can get engaged. So we have a community platform. If you're not aware, it's called IATI Connect. We'll put the link in the chat. But there is a data use community of practice on IATI Connect, and we're still growing this community and encouraging engagement. And so we would encourage you to join this community on IATI Connect to communicate and engage with each other, and also with the IATI Secretariat. We've set up something called the Data Use Query Corner, which is a space where you can actually share queries that you've carried out yourself. So some of these stories that we've heard today could be shared there, so that other data users could learn from your experience. And it's also a space where you can reach out to ask questions of the community, and sort of just create some engagement within the data use community. We also have a data use working group that meets every 2 weeks that you are welcome to join. Information about that is also available on Connect. And we have a data use drop-in once per month. The next session is on the 25th of October. It's a monthly session, and it's an opportunity, if you have questions, for us in the IATI Secretariat, you're welcome to come and ask those questions. And anybody is welcome to join those sessions. And of course, a lot of the folks that have presented today have reached out for one-on-one support through the help desk. And so that is always an option for you to reach out to support at iatistandard.org. So I didn't see, I saw there were some questions on the tools, but I didn't see any other questions come through in the chat. So we have a couple more minutes if anybody would want to raise a question in the chat, but we will share the link here to IATI Connect, but just welcome everybody to get engaged and join our community of data users.
Yeah, and thank you so much to the 6 of you who presented today. It's fantastic to see your insights and how you're using IATI data If anyone who's listening may have questions for you or would like to follow up more, I don't know if you're able to leave a level of contact details or a way of getting in contact with you. That might be through IATI Connect, that might be another way. But please do let us know if you're happy for that, and then we can help link people up. Yeah, if that's a good option for you guys.